Okay, so let's start with our webinars. Welcome to our webinar on working with connectors. This webinar, it will be recorded and you will get the slides recording and SQL snippets later. And you may ask any question using the Q&A button and also ask the questions anonymously and hop on and hop off on all the other sessions. And today we're doing the Working with Connectors track, and tomorrow we will see self-service troubleshooting and job management outlook. All right, working with connectors. So what can you expect from this session? We will tell you how to manage your data sources based on the, well, it's not new anymore. It's been there since 2.1, the modular connectors approach. And the following topics will be covered. So we take a look at the difference between SQL and modulars. We will take a look at the workflow, such as deploy connectors, update them, create connections, getting the information how to create the connections. And then we will dive into practice, work with the target table parameter, take a little bit look at the Facebook connector, and then also create a custom request without any templates that we provided and without the target table parameter. So motivation for modular connectors, why did we implement them? Why did we start working with them? So before modular connectors, the clients received the full implementation as a SQL script, and they imported it, and everything was good until modifications have been done at the connector level. So it would be okay to modify this outside the connector, but there were and are special use cases where modification need to be done. But this is sometimes a challenge when an update is happening, right? So we would then say, okay, we got a new version of this connector. We would provide the update also as a SQL connector, and when it's unmodified, would be simple. Just drop the schema, drop the data source probably, and execute the SQL script, and you have the new version. But the challenge with the modifications is and was that the support agent does not know what was changed. So when we want to do an update and we don't even know what's changed, we would then start or would need to do a difference, find a diff between the changes that have been done, but also identify what's new in the new connector. And this really is work that can take a lot of time, and uh, any custom implementation would be removed if we just dropped it and inserted the new one, and it turns into something that is called merge hell. When you want to merge too many things, you end up in merge hell and have nightmares about this. So a lot of stuff revolves around updating the connectors, which was a motivation for us to go with the modular connectors. So they actually have the same SQL implementation. So if you talk to the connector developers and we want to want them to elaborate on the difference between them, it's exactly the same SQL implementation behind it, but they are compiled into one jar in one Java archive. So it's actually Java executable that has the SQL implementation inside. They will behave like a data source. This is also a very different, a very important difference. So you don't see this up in your schemas. You can still create your own schemas and make the calls there, create the views there, but they will behave like a data source. And the code cannot be modified, but you can still, of course, call the procedure from the outside world, right? You can still use the procedures that are in there, and your at this point, then your any modifications they would be preserved when we do an update of the connector. And try not to use internal procedures. This is one important remark here. You have been warned they are subject to change. If you focus on using the internal procedures to implement a lot of your stuff, and then a new connector updates comes and they completely rework the connector, and yes, we've seen it, then a lot of this stuff might not work anymore. So yeah, if you have any trouble avoiding the internal procedures and saying you need them, then just talk to us. We can probably find a solution here. And the big advantage, of course, the update is easier. Just replace the jar files, and the usability is also probably easier because you have, instead of the web service plus the virtual schema, you just have a data source where you can call all these procedures. And of course, the views. All right, deployment. So how would I deploy a connector? That's another word for installing the connector, more or less. So there's a difference between the data virtuality versions. So when we introduced this, all the shipped modular connectors are already deployed. So they are installed. If you have a new one or have an update, um, you can just copy this jar to your DV server um, uh, deployments. And if you want to get the names, you can select from sysadmin DV connectors to see the ones that are already in place. So these are the ones that are already deployed, sysadmin DV connectors. So this is a lot of copying, and we did improve this behavior at the start of 2.3, where you can just copy the jar, and I'm sorry, it's standalone deployments. I made a mistake here. Modular connectors is actually where all the connectors reside, and you would copy them to DV server slash standalone deployments. This is the place they belong. I apologize here. I will update the slides before you get them. And now finally, you can get the name of the connector and just deploy it. Getting the name is as easy as selecting from modular connectors. And then you can call the procedure starting 2.3 in the beginning a deploy modular connector that would actually install it and put it to DV server standalone deployments. And now, since the 2.37 version, we have a web admin panel for this, and we can take a look at this. So let's just have a look at this. Sorry. Okay, I need to get out of my full screen here. And this is basically the place where I can find it. So I'm first just logging into my instance. Then I'm going to the admin panel. I need to authenticate. And the new feature is next to where you can install your license, also without having to copy the file. So we basically wanted to keep that away from you having to copy files around to the file system. Sometimes people don't have access, need to involve IT. It takes a long time. So all these copy operations are not necessary for licenses anymore, and also for modular connectors. So what you can do here is basically you have a list of the available ones, and this is actually the folder DV server modular connectors. So they're located in this place, and if you deploy them, they get copied to standalone deployments. And there you could just use, for example, if I want to deploy the AccuWeather connector, I can just simply click deploy here. Why don't we deploy them all at once? The problem there is there's too many. If we take a look at this very long list here, it's actually just takes too much memory to have them all installed or deployed. And this is why you can choose and also choose to undeploy them. And if we provide you a new one from our support, you can basically just search for this jar that we provided to you, download this from your local system and update this so you have the new version of it. All right. Okay, let's continue here. The modular connector updates, how can we update them? So in order to update a connector, you would actually just copy them to DV server standalone deployments, and don't forget to remove the old version. For the 2.37 and plus users, you can just use the admin panel for this update, and usually would also tell you from support how to do it, but this is the operation. And in both versions, when you update the connector, don't forget to recreate the data source. So the data source is still attached to the old version of the connector, and most of the time, it's sufficient to just go right-click on the data source, edit and click OK. That reinitializes the connection and then uses the new version of this modular connector. Now let's talk about how do I get the create statements, the create data source statement and the create connection statements. So we don't have a wizard for this yet. We have something great planned and are working on it very intensively right now. But right now you don't have an option to use a wizard to do the connection. And this is why we have this procedure um, to get the data source create statement of the modular connector. And here, for example, we are using Facebook as the example. And when I make this call, it will actually provide me with a procedure names that I need to use. And if I want to make this connection happen, then finally I can simply put in my access token, and that's basically here, run the create procedures, and it would then create the Facebook data source. So getting the modular connector create statement, let's just take a look how this works. It's in the util schema, and there it's get modular connector, create data source statement, and here Facebook was the name. And I can use this basically for any of the modular connectors and can just then create the connection with this. And if I want to know what connectors are installed, I can select from DV connectors. Sorry, select star. And here I would have actually the names of my deployed connectors, and I would also see the name. And this name is exactly the one that I need to pass on as a parameter for this utils procedure to finally get my data source create statement. All right. All right, so let's take a look at the features of the connector that we installed. So I prepared this already. Now let's still remain here. So you can simply select from the views and you can call the procedures, and they would then in Facebook connector case would make a live request to the Facebook API. And what I can see here as one example is simply selecting from my ad accounts table or view. And this would then make a live call to the Facebook API and return all my ad accounts for me. And one use case would be, this is the one template that we have right now that supports live data, that's overall ad performance. And we can also take a look at this It will take some time to get the result, but let's have a look at it. Now let's jump to my Facebook connection. And we can see here one thing, that's the overall ad performance. This is what I wanted to show to you. So let's make a call to this one. And while it loads, let's also make a call to the ad accounts. And the ad accounts should come in much quicker, but it's always with web connectors. It just takes some time for this to load. Let's also see what else is here. The current user, probably not that interesting. And most of the implementation is down here in our procedures. And because I want to provide parameters most of the time, I want to provide parameters to my calls to REST APIs. This is why we need to use procedures here to just have a way of passing parameters to these calls. Now we can see here the result, and yeah, the ad performance is still running. All right. Okay, so using the procedure, this is exactly what we want to do. And it's now becoming Facebook specific. So this is not entirely true for other connections, for other types of connectors, but specifically for Facebook, we have some very important procedures. When we're dealing with a marketing API, use them instead of the get procedures. So our connected development department, they created specifically these insights procedures and this action procedure to give you the greatest flexibility of passing the parameters of getting the report in just a single procedure or two single procedures. And the interesting parameters here are target table. So this connector does two things actually, or this procedure, if you call it. It actually returns the data to you, and it can also write the data to a target table. Right, so either way you want to have it, if you still want live data, using it like the logical data warehouse or using some live requests in your dashboards, you can omit the target table, then you will get the live result. And if you use the target table parameter down here, it will actually be written to a table. There's also no limit to DWH here, so you can use any kind of destination. And if you then call this procedure again, it will simply add the incremental data. So the target table parameter, it takes care of loading the data incrementally. And the connector developers then try to find a way to make the data incremental and only read the data that is required for you. For loading incrementally, you can just omit the end date parameter, because in our example, I will also make a call with a start date and an end date. But of course, don't use this parameter if you want to run this procedure every day to load the data incrementally. So let's just take a look here. So our ad performance just has arrived. It's probably taking too long for using it in a dashboard, but it's something that you could materialize for higher performance, and we talked about this. All right. Now, let's get back to our procedure that we want to call right now. There's one final remark here about the parameters, and that's the clean 28 days. This will actually remove the last 28 days each time and load the data again. This is important if you are tracking things like returns, right? If customers return the product, it might change the CPC values in the past. And this parameter will always reload the last 28 days because, of course, the incremental job doesn't know what changed. It only can assume that it didn't change or that some did change. So we gave the control over to you here to clean this the last days. And then, of course, we have some parameters here, the booleans that where you can basically set it true and false for all of these breakdowns. And then if you activate a breakdown, of course, the result set will have more lines. And you can choose if the data is requested using the sync API or the async API in Facebook. I think the async API is much better for larger result sets. All right, and sometimes the connectors also create additional tables. So even though you might just specify a target table, you would still get additional tables that start with the same target table name. And then, for example, the action stats would be something that is that does not fit into one row per day, for example, but you want to have all the stats listed of one day. That's why we put it into an external table that can be linked to our target table. And finally, if you just want to see a preview, you can activate this and it will not go through all the dates. It will just basically, I think, stop at the first page, but this is also really different for each of the connector, what the preview does. All right, marketing insights procedures. So I created an example for myself here. So let's just use this one. It's a very simple example here where we do not put it into a target database. We are getting the marketing insights for our account, and we used to run some Facebook ads very far back. Here, these are the ones that I chose. And since I don't do any breakdown, since I didn't change the level to campaign ad set or ad, I will really get the insights based on my account. So this is basically the summary data for each of the days. Again, it will take some time for the Facebook API to return this data to me, but eventually we will then see some marketing insights for this account. Regarding the return values or the stuff that's put in the target table, it's actually always the same. So we have an architecture in data virtuality where procedures have a set of return values, and they can actually not be changed, right? So the return values will always be the same, but sometimes the fields will be filled and sometimes they won't, depending on your choices here and the parameters. And this is for actions, and this is for insights. For insights, we have many more uh, data in the result set, as you can see here. And again, they will be filled based on the parameters that you provide. For me, I just made a very simple call, but this is already taking a lot of time for the Facebook API to process it. All right. All right, the next thing we will be talking about is how to create custom requests. And let's talk about why do I need these custom requests, is probably especially for Facebook. There's a lot of templates that we provide for you, right? So these, the procedures, they are the templates that you can use. But the Facebook API, if you take a look at a lot of APIs, you can just combine them endlessly and they would always produce different results. And even though we already have many, don't use the internal procedures, have many of these templates, you still might have something in your company or your marketing structure that so you want to implement your own. And you probably already have seen this is just running for quite some time. And you have probably seen already the Facebook, just here, Graph API Explorer. And what you can do in this Graph API Explorer is simply you log in with your own account. Let me just refresh this page. You can log in with your account, and you would actually see here um, uh, uh, stuff like this. Right, you can get any kind of data, and you can do your exercises with the API. And one that I found out would be to list all the ads that are located under this ad account. And let's just do this. Also, again, just a very simple list. But what would be the problem here if I just entered this um, uh, into my wizard, into my REST wizard, is that everything is fine, but I have other pages to go. And we have a Help Center article to handle paged results. This requires creating a procedure, but now this procedure can be created automatically. And let's take a look at how this works. Let's now finally take a look if our query has finished here. Yes, so we finally got our the marketing insight on the account level from the start date to this start date with a daily parameter set. So I could also get it for a whole month, for example. And here we can see what the data looks like. And if you then activate the target table, the connector will always put this directly into the call. And of course, you can always schedule a script from this. And then just as I already told you in the other session, always use the connector name first and then get marketing insights or something like this. And then finally go through, choose the time when this needs to be running. So probably in the morning when all the ads are in. And now we basically automated this. And if you want this to run incrementally, remove the end date parameter and it will always load until today. And now coming back to our own custom query, let's take a look on how to create this procedure. So we actually have this custom request here. And there is one procedure in our Facebook connector that allows you to create these procedures for endpoints. And I put in my request here, and then the target um, name here, the name of the target procedure. So this procedure that we're dynamically creating for this endpoint will eventually then have the name Facebook example ads, and it can be created immediately. I set this to false here. And should the async API be used or not? And now let's finally do this in practice. This is the resulting procedure, but let's take a look at how this turns out when we do this on our own. So Facebook, here we go, create procedure. Sorry. Let's go one back. Create procedure for endpoint. Create procedure for endpoint. So I double clicked on it. Now I can enter my stuff, and here basically it says to me here without the HTTPS and something like this. So I can actually just copy the stuff that I got from the Graph API Explorer. I can put in the target parameter. So that would be a new. Let's just put it to views. And then, yes, you can create it right away. And don't use the async API. So this is basically how it works. Now I just am creating my own procedure for this endpoint, and I'm putting it immediately into views.my Facebook procedure, and it's executed immediately. So the procedure is created, and it's using the async operation mode. Now, what this looks like here would be the example here. And what can we see here now? This is basically the implementation of paging that is automatically assigned here. So we are assigning some variables here, and then we do how a lot of our connectors are working internally. We are creating this local temporary table, meaning this is an in-memory table. It will just exist as long as this procedure is running and will then be cleaned away. They have a high performance, but also high memory consumption. And so we are creating this, and then we are starting with a loop. So while we are not done, we're selecting from the call to the Facebook API, and we are inserting this into our local temporary table. So chunk by chunk, page by page, we're inserting this into our local temporary table. And then the final remark down here, the final command down here would be select, meaning this procedure returns the data from our temporary table. And in the loop itself, we are selecting from this call to do query. That would be internal do query here, which is executed on the Facebook data source. We select the response from it, and we are then converting this to from XML to a table with the according information, and we are then getting the paging.next information. So we're getting the next page as we could see it on the Graph API Explorer, and then we're basically looping and looping until we don't find paging next anymore. So at this time we are filling up the local temporary table, and then in the end we return it. And in order for you to not have to create this, you can simply just use this create procedure for endpoint. And sometimes it really depends on the connector. Some connector have this nice feature that they investigate the metadata. So they all have an initialize data source. So here we see that it's finally been created. There we can see it, and it's basically the same thing. And our connectors, they have an initialize data. Initialize metadata. And this procedure is called when the connection is established. And for some connectors that have dynamic uh, entities or dynamic endpoints, dynamic stuff on the API side, this procedure often just creates the procedures here dynamically based on the data that I want to get based on the data structure of that the client has established on the system that is feeding the API, so to say. All right, and now let's go ahead with our presentation here. So we've seen the created the procedure, and we took a look at the generated procedure. We can also take a look at the generator procedure at this point. So if you want to know, would like to know how we are doing this internally, let's just search for this. Let's just search for create procedure for endpoint. And here we go. Let me just extend this a little bit. And it's basically, of course, getting all the parameters, declaring some variables on its own, doing an exception if something is missing, getting some data using JavaScript, and then in the end, we are creating this dynamically with a template. Here it's in JavaScript, but usually you can just create the templates with um, an execute immediate. So you can also build up your own procedures dynamically. If you use execute immediate, you can basically provide to it any kind of string, or in this case a CLOB, where you have the procedure definition. All right. Okay, now finally, for the procedure that we just created, we want to replicate this data now as a exercise. And so let's get back to our procedure that was created. Let's go to the views part. Let's just run it right now. So this is basically just getting all the list of all these different ad accounts down there. What I would need to do to be able to replicate this on the on the with a replication job would be to create a view around it, right? Because I cannot create a replication job from a stored procedure, so I wrap a view around it. So I would create the view. I put it in my views schema, and I would name this views dot Facebook data. And then select from it. We've seen it today in some other session, I think. Select everything from, and then we do the sub-select for this stored procedure call and provide an alias. So this is now actually a view that is wrapped around a stored procedure call. And now I basically created this view inside my view schema. Facebook data, it's called. Just got the ID, a list of the IDs that I want to return. And now I could select from it right now, but it's taking a lot of time. So I can go ahead and replicate this right away. And just choose the most simple stuff, the copy over. And then just create this in the target table Facebook data in my DWH data source. And now we basically have to schedule this. And this was basically the workflow to create this job, to create the procedure dynamically from stuff that we do not have yet in our um, uh, templates of the Facebook connector, but you can use these procedures to create dynamic stuff. All right, and this copy over job is right here. can run it right now, and later it will then contain all the data from the execution of the stored procedure and will refresh the table on a daily basis. So I choose copy over, I selected the schedule, and of course, this is a very simple example, right? It just lists um, the ad accounts. But if I want to do an incremental load later, what I can do is put the procedure in such a way that it would return the last days. So for example, the last day only or more than the last days, for example, the last 3 days, having a date column. And if we remember the batch replication, then this could actually be used in accordance with a view with the ID of the to prevent duplicates using the date for this. And this is how you can also do the incremental load if you do not have a target table parameter. And of course, the functions that you can use here are the current date or timestamp now, something like this, and also timestamp add to remove to get to yesterday and the days before. All right. So let's talk about what I tried to show you in this session was that there's much better management features in modular connectors. Let's put it this way. They still have the same features as the SQL connector, but there's much better ways to manage them. Be aware when you're using Facebook, use the marketing procedures, and you can always create your own procedures if we do not have the regarding templates. So are there any open questions right now? Okay, so one is that there's not a lot of examples in the blog documentation. Um, This is due to the fact that we are reworking the connector documentation right now. The Facebook documentation actually already looks very, very nice. Um, if you want to use this connector specifically, you can just request the documentation from us. We are not confident to show it yet in public to release it, but as soon as we have improved it in the right way, we will then be able to show this to you. And there's much more there. Probably if I pause my share, let me see if I can access it quickly to just give you a glimpse of what this will look like in the future. So just a sec. So let me just share my screen again. So this is actually the connection, what it's going to look like. And for Facebook, um, we have all the stuff, how to register your application, how to get your ID, I mean your API token. Um, and then finally, exactly the use case I was talking about. Also, they are working with marketing insights and some examples of daily data flow here that you can use, and probably a little bit more um, user scenarios, and then finally the reference itself. All right. Okay, and if you uh, want to see more of the ways to work with stored procedure language, it's something that you can probably provide as a feedback. If you want to see more about this, we can also have a future learning sessions on this stuff. All right, so thank you very much for attending today. Don't miss out on tomorrow's topics. I'm just saying. You will see how to get the log file to the Data Virtuality Studio finally, and you can also give some feedback on how you imagine the future of the jobs panel to have a better overview. So have a nice day, everyone, and talk to you soon.